Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to CoinCast, where today your host Zach is joined by Mike Trisko, who is the CTO of Phore. Phore is a marketplace-based blockchain project that aims to sort of decentralized marketplaces across the world. Now, it's a great project. I personally love it. Just as a disclaimer, I actually have a node of Phore myself, so I may be slightly biased, but that just shows how much I do really like the project and how excited I am to have Mike with us today. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Welcome to CoinCast. It's great for you to join us. Do you want to just give a little introduction to Phore, what it is, what it's aiming to do, etc.?
Sure. So Phore is actually a combination of technologies. There is a Phore blockchain, and that is based on a proof of stake algorithm. It has Masternodes. It has some privacy features and fast scalable transactions. We recently integrated SegWit into Phore, so it increased the capacity of it for transactions, as well as fixing some security, small security issues. There's been a lot of development so far along the lines of the Phore's technology. We've also done a number of things to make it more user-friendly. I think in general, a lot of crypto wallets are not very user-friendly and kind of require a lot of technical knowledge to really know how to use it. And so, for example, we've put a lot of graphical user interfaces in front of things that previously had to be done with commands. So we've moved things forward a little bit in that user-friendliness area. We're actually working on a new generation architecture, though. So we're hoping later this year we're going to be moving to something we've kind of been referring to as Synapse Masternodes, but it's really just the next generation of Phore's architecture. And that will include sharding architecture, which will mean that where right now you have one blockchain, you might have potentially up to 1,000 all being processed at the same time. So it'll be highly scalable, but it's not just being done for scalability reasons, it's also for flexibility. We're going to be adding smart contracts as one of the types of shards that we'll have. But we'll also have transfer shards, which will be more similar to the fast, secure payments that you see today. And then we'll have a governance shard that will handle certain functions for the chain itself in terms of voting and some of the things that Masternodes do today, but they'll potentially be more functionality. And then we'll also have the ability to customize other shards for different purposes. So that's really one of the unique things we're building is being able to have shards that are dedicated to specific purposes and optimized for those use cases. Because most blockchains you see, if you look at something like Bitcoin, it's really focused a little bit more around store of value. It's not necessarily the fastest blockchain in terms of capacity, but it's optimized to be very secure. Some other blockchains might say, oh, I'm more optimized for those fast transactions, and they're able to handle a lot more capacity, but they might not have necessarily the same security. And there's a lot of these trade-offs because you can't necessarily optimize for everything. And so one of the things we're trying to do is to actually allow that to be optimized for different things on different parts of the blockchain.
Yeah, cool. So that's quite an in-depth view of the whole of Phore, really, and what you're aiming to do in the future. That's really cool. The sharding is extremely interesting. So do you want to just give us an overview as well of how sort of the marketplace works?
Sure.
As a decentralized or blockchain marketplace?
Yeah. Now the blockchain itself is a separate application. It uses the blockchain, but it works over a separate set of technologies. So it's also fully decentralized. It's completely peer-to-peer. So you might be able to think of it a little bit like an eBay or an Amazon, but without any centralized platform. So you're able to set up your own store. You don't need anybody's permission to do that. You can run the software yourself, put in your own listings, sell things, and buy and sell those things using Phore as the currency. There's no middleman. There's no data collected by anyone. So it's completely private between you and the other person that are doing the transaction. For security purposes, so that you might avoid some of the scams that you see when you have things like that, there is the ability to use a moderator as a third party that would be able to resolve disputes. And that's also a decentralized thing, so people can apply to be verified moderators, and they can provide their identity just so you know who that moderator is if they're stepping in. But it's a nice system in terms of being able to have that service if you need to, but still have it in a completely decentralized way, and only having necessarily maybe one other person that would be involved if you were exchanging information and had some sort of dispute that needed to be resolved.
Yeah, cool. So So on that, why do you think that's needed sort of in the marketplace, in not just in crypto, for example, across the whole world? Because obviously there are some big, you just mentioned them, Amazon and eBay, those are big marketplaces. eBay's probably more applicable in this case. But in terms of using blockchain and decentralizing those sort of systems, why is that needed across the world?
Well, I think there's a few primary reasons that I think it's needed. One is privacy. You see hacks and people selling data and governments seizing data and things along those lines all the time now in the news. It's just almost every day there's a new breach or there's a new story about some data that was shared with someone. You see all the things going on with Facebook now. So I think part of this is letting people do those economic transactions without having that centralized platform where your data is essentially not yours anymore. And could be sold to advertisers, it could be given to governments, it could be sold to really anybody. I mean, in many cases, even I could buy someone's data from one of these platforms. And so I think part of it is that privacy aspect that's important. And then I think the other is just overall autonomy, economic freedom, being able to do things without permission. I think at least in the United States, and I think in many other countries, you're also seeing a lot of political back and forth with people trying to boycott or blacklist or deplatform people. And I think there's a need in the market for something where you can have that sort of platform yourself and be able to do things like collect money if you're crowdfunding or have a store where you can sell merchandise or whatever it might be without having someone have the ability to shut you down because they don't like your political views or don't agree with you on something. And I think cryptocurrency itself helps to break that chain because you've seen in many of these stories where it may not even be the platform itself that is the one that is trying to shut you down. It might be Visa or MasterCard or PayPal or something else that people go after. Maybe even the hosting platform like Gab has been attacked through their hosting platforms and things. And so I think cryptocurrency helps with the financial part of that, but there needs to be that application layer as well. So we're trying to provide both and have both a cryptocurrency as well as the applications that are ready for users to use, where you can set up these things and not worry about someone having the ability to completely shut down a platform just because they don't like it.
Yeah, cool. And I mean, I don't want to get too controversial here, but we've seen that in the news a lot recently with people being banned. I mean, someone that I don't agree with, but someone like Alex Jones who just got banned off everything and just was gone. And a lot of companies now have that ability. And I don't feel like, personally, from my perspective anyway, that some of these companies are good stakeholders in the free speech and in freedom of expression across the world. And I think that system really is needed. And I agree with you there on making that privacy, making that ability to have a marketplace no matter what is sort of a really needed thing. But so where do you draw the line then? So obviously you're saying you're not going to get banned for your political views or your views on things. So where do you draw the line on the marketplace? Obviously you hope people aren't going to be selling illegal things. Do you have any ability therefore to shut down people who are selling something that's illegal?
So here's how we think about it. It's first of all, it is a decentralized system, so many things people can't do without any ability for anyone to shut them down completely. But at least as the current architecture is designed for the Phore marketplace, there's a search engine built into it to list things when you search for them. So we do have the ability to filter items from that if we needed to. Now, someone could stand up their own search engine because that is a decentralized component too. They'd be able to add one potentially and have that unfiltered view. And someone might be able to go to a store if someone advertised it somewhere else and still reach that store. But to me, that's no different than if someone stood up a website right now and was selling drugs or some other illegal thing on it. They're responsible for their actions, and law enforcement can step in and deal with it if it's illegal in their jurisdiction. And so I think those existing mechanisms are still going to be there. If you're running a store, it's a lot like running a website. And so if law enforcement needed to step in, people could report them to law enforcement if they saw someone was doing something illegal, and that's their responsibility. But I think to me, it's the difference of saying, okay, if we were the Google with our search engine, Google doesn't list all these illegal websites, and we would potentially have that same task to say, okay, if we see something bad, we're going to try and not advertise it for them. But they still have the ability to stand up a web server and do whatever they're going to do, and then they're responsible for their actions, whatever they do.
So because it's decentralized, you're basically just a facilitator. You're providing the platform. They're responsible for what they do with the platform. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah, and I don't think that most people are looking to do these things.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a criminal, but I think if I was one, I wouldn't be looking to use the Phore Marketplace for that purpose. It's not, I think there may be some competitors, if you want to think about it, that are making it more specifically easy to say I can like have a hidden store or you need a password to get into it and it's encrypted or something. We're not doing anything that would really help that sort of thing happen. We're not trying to be Silk Road. We're not trying to be on the dark web necessarily, although you can run it over Tor if you want to. Yeah. But it's not really designed to say, let's make it easy for criminals to do criminal things. It's designed for everybody to use. And, I think just like when in the early days of eBay, people were worried about people scamming people or other things, and it just didn't happen. I don't think that it's likely that a lot of people are going to be using the Phore Marketplace for those purposes either. But at the same token, like there are different laws in different jurisdictions. If there's, legal marijuana in one state, then they should probably be able to sell it in that state. And it's not up to us to necessarily step in and say that they can't. And so I think, it really is more of a local and personal responsibility to say that people are going to use the platform the way they should.
Yeah, I think with the blockchain as well, you're saying, for example, marijuana selling in California or, rather than somewhere where it's illegal, I think that might actually push places like blockchain like yourselves, companies like yourselves might be pushing legislators to actually move on some of these issues. And I think that's probably a good thing because, traditionally, especially in the West, governments are very slow to move, very slow to legislate. And having something like this might actually push them to move on something like that, obviously, as it gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and of course, wherever we would be subject to regulations, we're going to try and comply with those regulations. We're not trying to like skirt any laws or anything like that. But at the same time, I do think that the way the system is designed, I still would use that same analogy of it being a little bit like the World Wide Web if you just set up your own website in your house. It's a lot like that. So if you did something like that and you were doing something illegal, then you'd be accountable for what you did. Your internet provider wouldn't necessarily be, and Google wouldn't be responsible for what you did. So I think that's where how I look at it. But again, we're trying to be a solution for the everyday merchant who wants to have a local business. We have a conference coming up actually in Africa where they're going to be presenting the Phore Marketplace to a bunch of local merchants there and explaining the system to them. And that's the type of thing we're trying to promote. We want to have local businesses, maybe small businesses, have a way to set up a store online without needing any expensive software or any sort of complicated solution someone might need to set up for them, that it's something they can do themselves. They just download the application, they can list something the same day, and someone can buy them right away.
Yeah, and I think that is really quite key there as well with talking about Africa or talking about places where traditionally don't have a large access to a massive market worldwide. With the internet, of course, that's coming, but with something decentralized, it's even more transparent. It's even better for people across the world who don't have access to something like this.
Yeah. Now, another aspect I would point out is I do think it's also more efficient. I mean, there's no fees in the marketplace right now. We may at some point add some premium services and start monetizing certain things, but at this point, transactions are completely free. I don't know if that's ever going to change. I think the premium services might be like Power Solar tools or other things that we might add onto it. But I think, and that would just be because we want this to be sustainable. We want to be able to keep developing it. But the transaction fees you pay on something like Amazon or eBay is often 10% or more. And so if you are using cryptocurrency and you're able to sell and buy things peer-to-peer with no fees, then you potentially could sell them for cheaper. People can buy them for cheaper, and it would essentially cut out a lot of the middleman. And I think that's another great tie-in with cryptocurrency, that you don't need PayPal, you don't need a bank, you don't need any of these other institutions involved, that it's just you and the other person doing the transaction.
Yeah, of course. That's brilliant. And do you think with that, obviously there's regulatory risk across the world for cryptocurrencies. If we just talk about the general market, do you think there is any regulatory risk with this? Or do you think, as you said before, you just see yourselves as sort of like a website or an ability to build a website or eBay? Do you think there is any regulatory risk there?
Well, there's always going to be risk. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you really can't control what the any particular government is going to say. That they may say this is just banned, and we might have to deal with that at some point. Whether it means we'd have to not operate in that country somehow, or whatever we might need to do, I can't really control what any government might decide. But I think what we're doing, to me, doesn't seem controversial at all. Really, I mean, I don't see how it really is any different than what eBay is doing. The only difference is that eBay might have a really centralized big platform to be able to say we can remove your listing and do something like that and control those things. But I think, if you compare it to something like Craigslist, it's not really conceptually much different than that. You can list whatever you want for sale there, and someone can buy it from you. The only difference here is that it's online instead of being maybe like a person-to-person thing. And so I don't think there's any precedent in my mind that would say this is something we're doing that's controversial. I think it's very much like a lot of very legitimate services that are there now that, governments have embraced, and there isn't really any controversy. I think cryptocurrency has sort of an unearned reputation for being like, oh, it's just for criminals or it's just for illegal things. I really think that's the minority of what people are doing with it. I mean, yes, it happens, but I think it actually happens with dollars and other currencies just as much, if not more. And so I think, again, to me, the existing mechanisms that law enforcement and other institutions have to deal with those problems, they can deal with them. Yeah. And to me, I just don't see this as a really controversial thing that we're doing.
Yeah, cool. I completely agree with you as well. And I think the greatest risk for all cryptocurrencies, not just yours, is the risk of misunderstanding or not understanding it, which is a risk with any new technology. And I think, the only risk there is the fact that people might legislate before they actually fully understand what's going on. Especially some politicians across the world. But I do really agree with you on the fact that it's not a controversial thing. It's just doing what eBay is doing or what someone else is doing. So if we move on to sort of a bit of the background stuff that you guys have going on with Phore. So you decided that you're going to be just doing Masternodes in terms of the mining. So why proof of stake? Sorry. So why did you decide not to have any proof of work and completely go the proof of stake route?
Well, the Phore currency was launched before I joined the team, so I can't necessarily speak for the thought process that went into it. But I will say that I'm a big believer in proof of stake. I think it is more sustainable in many ways than proof of work. I'm not anti-proof of work. I mean, I think Bitcoin is a great technology and it's very secure and all that, but I do think it's a problem that if you have an ever-increasing amount of hash rate, that you are using a ton of energy to produce something that I think proof of stake does have the capability to do some very similar types of things in terms of security. I'm sure a lot of Bitcoin or other, maximalists or other proof of work advocates would argue that point, but I think you've also seen even more recently that a lot of proof of work coins that may not have the hash rate of the Bitcoin have been attacked with 51% attacks, and it's not even that expensive. I think the idea of proof of stake has some really attractive traits to it that if you try to attack something, you're likely to be penalized for it because you have to invest in it first. And so if you attack what you're invested in, you're actually costing yourself money in the process. And to do a 51% attack, you'd have to invest a lot and potentially even push the price up of whatever you're trying to invest in a lot to the point where it just wouldn't make any economic sense to even do the attack. So I think there is a lot of attractiveness to the proof of stake idea and the protocol itself. I will say also that we're moving to a new proof of stake protocol with the new architecture that has some additional properties to it. Right now, we're on a proof of stake 3.0 protocol that I believe Blackcoin originally introduced. And it's a very good protocol, I think, and it's proven the test of time as far as I'm concerned in terms of being pretty secure. But there are still some issues with it, like any protocol. There's always going to be pros and cons, and I think one of them is a well-known problem called the nothing at stake problem, which means as with blockchains, any kind of blockchain, whether it's proof of work or proof of stake, you might have forks at some point, which means there's competing blocks going, and you have to decide which one is actually the official one. And one of the ways that proof of stake would do that, well, it's still a sort of, okay, let's see which one is the longest chain idea. But with the current protocol, this nothing at stake problem means that if you're a node on the network and you're trying to stake on a fork, you're actually incented to keep all the forks going because you don't know which one's going to win. So you might want to stake each one of them to say, I might get the reward for every fork And so there's no penalty if you do that. It's actually to your benefit to do that. So that's a little bit of a conflict of saying if you want to reach consensus, which is the whole idea of a blockchain, you need some way of making people not propagate more and more forks. So the new protocol we're going to be moving to is Casper, which is what Ethereum is planning to move to over time. I think we may actually implement it before they do. But the one of the ideas behind that is that it actually does penalize you if you vote for multiple blocks at the same length. So once you commit, you're pretty much committed to that. And based on the way the whole algorithm works, it deterministically will lead to a block being finalized a lot more quickly and a lot less forks happening because you pretty much are pushed down one route instead of being able to say, well, I'm just going to keep them all going and see who wins.
Yeah.
So that's one example of it.
Yeah, cool. So that's really interesting, and that's definitely an interesting take on the proof of stake versus proof of work. So why did you then focus on Masternodes? Then really, is it to give people voting abilities, that sort of thing, or?
Yeah, well, I would tell a similar story about now and the future with that. Masternodes, I think, in one respect, give people sort of a passive income aspect to investing in cryptocurrency, which is one of the things that first led me to be interested in Phore. That you can set aside a certain amount of money, and your coins are actually, you can keep them offline, so they're not at risk of being hacked or anything, but they're still generating a return. So I think that's one aspect that's kind of attractive to the Masternode concept. The governance is also a key aspect, that when you invest that certain amount, in the case of Phore, it's 10,000 Phore, you're able to vote on all the budget proposals. So you have an influence over what happens and where the money goes that is generated by the blockchain every month to fund the development and furtherance of Phore as a cryptocurrency. And so it is a fully decentralized process. We've embraced the whole decentralized idea across the board. And so we believe in the decentralized governance as well, where our team gets some funding from the community, essentially, but they're able to say, yes, I want that, or I don't want that. And if someone else wanted to submit a proposal, they're free to do so. And if they had the support of the community, they would get that funding as well. So I think it's a nice system for giving that decentralized governance capability to the community. And Phore is a very community-driven coin. So we're all in on that in terms of saying we want the community to give us feedback on a regular basis on what they want and what they like. And we're going to be driving Phore forward in that vein.
Yeah, so as a Masternode owner myself as well, it is a really good system, and there's always a few options to vote on every month. 3 or 4 options every month to vote on different things, and I think it's a great way of furthering the development of the coin. It's definitely something that's a lot better than I've got a lot of proof of work. I mean, I run a mining company, so. Proof of work, obviously, you just go and mine. Whereas with a Masternode, I'm like, I can actually choose which direction this coin goes in for the future of the of the blockchain. And I think Masternodes may actually form the basis of sort of being a more democratized society in terms of voting and community consensus on a lot of things. If we think. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
I was just going to add, I think it is a nice system from that standpoint. I think another thing that it adds, which is an intriguing thing to me about cryptocurrencies that have this type of system, that it gives it a resiliency too. I mean, if our whole team died in a plane crash, another development team could step in and get that funding going forward, and there would be no other thing they would have to do. They could just say, we're going to take over and start developing Phore. And if there was some problem, and I don't think there is going to be with our team, but if we lost the trust of the community for some reason, then another community would be able to, again, step in and get that funding. And I think it's also a good way of holding us accountable to the community over time. If you compare that to like an ICO project, which we never did an ICO or pre-mine. It was all just, self-funded and then through these blockchain rewards. We have to earn that money essentially from the trust of the community every month. Whereas an ICO, it's kind of all up front. You don't really know what they're going to do with that money. Certainly, we've seen some bad things happen in that vein. There's also a lot of very legitimate ICOs, so I'm not painting it in a bad light, but it is something where you're kind of putting a lot of trust in the team up front to saying you're going to deliver what you promised for what was given at the beginning. And I kind of like the ongoing aspect to it, where there's a dialogue with the community and we are held accountable for what we deliver.
Yeah, cool. So that's really interesting. I completely agree with you on that. So if we just segue a little bit into the makeup of the coin itself, as a coin, we're not talking at the blockchain, talking about the exchanges that it's on. We've seen a few, especially with Masternode coins. You're on IDAX. You're on IDAX. So you're actually on an exchange that's pretty good. But like we've seen a lot of Masternode coins out there being on, for example, like Cryptopia, which then was hacked and not being on many exchanges. Do you feel that exchanges are being a bit unfair to the smaller coins, or do you think they have every right to accept and not accept any coin they want?
Well, I think there's probably a mix of things going on there. I mean, I think the way the market is right now, there are very big exchanges that have a lot of power in the marketplace, and they can essentially dictate or make a huge difference to a coin by either listing it or not listing it. And I certainly think they have the right to list or not list whichever coin they want. It's not a public service they're doing. I mean, they're a business, so I think they have every right to choose what they list or don't list. I certainly don't like the fact that for some of these exchanges, they have really expensive listing fees that we would certainly not be able to afford right now because we didn't have a multi-million-dollar ICO. And in some cases, just at least from what I've seen and heard, it can be, you need to put $500,000 or $1 million or some outrageous amount of money just to get your coin listed. And then even then, you don't even know if they're going to delist you 6 months later. So it's, I do think that smaller projects have a hard time sometimes to be able to get more exposure on exchanges and to be able to be more accessible. I'd certainly love for Phore to be on as many exchanges as possible, and we're working on that on a regular basis. But I think in many cases they do have a due diligence process, and they want to make sure that if there is some illegitimate or scam type of project, that they're not going to have their user base ripped off by that. So I understand the need for due diligence and making sure that you can trust the team, you can trust the technology, you can see that they're adding something to the marketplace in terms of the crypto ecosystem, and that there is some traction around that people are interested in it. I mean, again, they're a business, they're mostly working on trading fees, and so if there's no interest in the coin, then it might probably just doesn't make business sense for them to do it. So I understand a lot of the considerations that go into those things, but I think I do hope that there are more options. I'd really like for decentralized exchanges to be more of an option for people. I think certainly in some cases they are an option to at least get listed, but I think it's such a defragmented market. It's almost like you see a new decentralized exchange popping up every week now. And so it's tough to say where would everyone go and trade on a decentralized market. What I'd really like to see is to have some way for them to collaborate and have some way of sharing order books and things so that whichever decentralized exchange you log onto, you could potentially access all the orders from all the other ones. And that might actually make them more of a real competitor to some of the really big centralized exchanges. And being a big believer in decentralization, I think that would help as well.
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that as well, because on this show I've talked to Birake Exchange, which is trying to do that, trying to build a decentralized exchange that people can share order books and build other exchanges on. So there is a real need for that out in the marketplace, and I think I read somewhere that it's a minimum $75,000 for Binance to be listed on Binance. I don't want to, and I personally love Binance. I think it's a great exchange, and a great. It's got a great UI. It's got massive volume, so it's great. But some of those prices, especially for smaller coins or coins that haven't raised 100 million in an ICO, it's reasonably expensive.
Well, I like Binance a lot too. I'm hoping we might be able to get listed on there someday with Phore, and I think we might even want to find other ways to partner with them if we could to even help them. I mean, I have some ideas on the Phore marketplace and some of the other things that we're doing that might even help exchanges apart from their trading business, kind of as a different idea for them. So I'm looking into some of those ideas as well. But I think again it varies in terms of what they charge. You don't really know in many cases even what it's going to be until you get further into the process of saying, okay, yeah, we want to list you, but now it's going to cost you this much money. So, I think again, it's something that I hope the decentralized exchanges will disrupt it a little bit and maybe cause the decentralized exchanges to lower their fees or say, okay, we realize that we can't necessarily charge this amount of money because we're not the only show in town. And so I'd like to see more competition that are real options and good options for having that liquidity, because I think that's really the end result of what happens with this current market is you end up with a lot of projects. They might be very good projects, but people just don't know about them. Or if they only trade on 5 exchanges, well, if you're not on one of those 5, then those people just aren't even going to be involved with your coin. So yeah. I do think it would be better for the whole industry to be able to say, how could we make this whole thing more liquid so that it doesn't matter so much which exchange you're on, because you can maybe go across multiple exchanges and do trades regardless of where it is. And we're actually even adding crypto trading in a decentralized way to the Phore marketplace. So we're doing our part in that as well. Yeah. The next release we have will have some level of beta testing of crypto trading for Phore and Bitcoin at least, and we will probably be adding additional pairs as we go forward as well.
Cool. Oh, cool. That's really interesting. So, and I saw on your roadmap something that I personally find very interesting is trying to build a decentralized crowdfunding site on top of Phore as well. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because that again is, you've got a marketplace which is massive market, massive idea, and then you've got decentralized crowdfunding, which is something different but quite related, but also that's massive. That's a massive project. So do you mind talking a little bit about that?
Sure, and we're still in the earlier stages of that, so that's going to be coming a little bit later than some of the other things we talked about. But we are in the midst of designing that. I think what we're trying to model it after is something a little bit along the Patreon model, where if you have an independent artist or an independent journalist or someone that's a small entrepreneur, has a following, might have some of these same controversial political problems that we've talked about earlier, that they would potentially have a platform where they could say, if you want to contribute to my cause, if you want to help me keep producing my blog articles or my reporting or my artwork, that you can support me in this way. And I think we've seen the same sorts of issues there, where whether it's Kickstarter or Patreon, that people have been kicked off the platform, and a lot of times it's not because they're doing anything illegal, it's just that people say, I don't like you, or I don't like your views. And so I think there's a market need for that as well, to say that with cryptocurrency and a decentralized platform for crowdfunding, you would have a full stack solution to be able to raise funds for something like that from your following directly, and also have the same privacy aspect of you interact directly with your community. You might know who your followers are if they share your identity. You might even be able to do it anonymously if you want, but that you wouldn't have some centralized platform that's keeping track of all the data, or maybe doing something else with the data that you don't want them to do. So I think it has a lot of parallels to what we're doing with the marketplace, and it makes a lot of sense to provide that same sort of service for crowdfunding. I think in the future we could expand that to be a little bit more like a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo and fund projects that way. In the future, maybe even have an ICO funding sort of crowdfunding as well. But I think right now we're trying to start with the individual artist sort of market as our primary focus. And so we're designing the features of that initial crowdfunding solution around that.
Yeah, cool. That's a really interesting idea, and that's definitely needed. I mean, with all the amount of people that have either left Patreon willingly because of controversial Patreon decisions, or Patreon's banned them or removed them, and then even PayPal's banned quite a few people, and Visa and MasterCard. So that is definitely something that's going to be massive, and going to be a massive part of the future of media, really. So in that sense, in the sense of your marketplace and where you're moving, do you actually see, you've already mentioned a couple of obviously massive companies that are in the space as a marketplace, Amazon, eBay, and then you've got Shopify for people making their own marketplace. Do you see yourself as competing with those, or do you see yourself as in a separate bracket, really?
I think there's definitely overlap for a lot of these things. I mean, certainly if you're listing items peer-to-peer, that has a lot of overlap with eBay. But I don't see myself as a direct competitor to eBay either, because, again, it's a decentralized platform. To me, that's the key difference. It's not even the cryptocurrency part of it, because eBay could decide to accept cryptocurrency tomorrow, and that's not going to be a sustainable competitive advantage for me. If Amazon or eBay just says, okay, now we can take whatever crypto you want, then that advantage would be on their side probably at that point. But I think the decentralized part of it is something that would be very hard for them to replicate, because their fees essentially come from the platform they're running and the fees they charge for those listings and for the final value fees and the other things that are entailed in that, the PayPal fees, the shipping fees, all these other things that they roll into their service, where I think the solution we're putting out in the marketplace is more of a peer-to-peer direct, you handle it yourself, but you don't pay any of those fees. So I think that would be really, to me, the part that would be difficult for a centralized platform to provide, because then where would the revenue come from? You know, right now you can use the Phore marketplace and we don't get any fees at all. So it's really just a free thing that you can do, and you can sell and buy, and there's no middleman at all. So I think that would be a pretty difficult thing for a big platform player like that to replicate, because they have that big cost structure, and they're obviously trying to generate additional revenues as they're a business. So, we probably will, like I said, have some monetization strategies over time, and that may lead us in a direction more like a Shopify, because I know that's a lot more like what they do, is they provide those services and have it more as a software as a service. So we'll see if they become a little bit more of a direct competitor. But I think from a Phore perspective, we have the cryptocurrency, and that has a lot of features built into it. We have the platform that has a lot of features built into it. And over time, I'm expecting them to come together. So when we have smart contract functionality, the Turing complete, you can do pretty much anything you want on the blockchain once we have that in the Synapse future architecture, then a lot of those things can be built directly into the marketplace. And you can have more complex transactions. You can have anything related to like payment terms or built-in triggers to other things like shipping or other types of things. Dispute resolution can potentially be handled a number of different ways. And I think by having all that integrated, I think it provides a pretty powerful solution as an overall solution that, again, would be difficult for an independent platform provider to provide, because they don't have that underlying blockchain technology embedded into it.
Yeah, and that's a massive thing with smart contracts as well. When you integrate smart contracts, it basically makes everything so transparent, and you can see exactly where liabilities lie, who's responsible for what with smart contracts, and it's so easy to see. So what is you say centralized system, for example, you were saying that their revenue model comes from fees. So what's your sustainable revenue model for a decentralized marketplace?
Well, I think there's a number of them. So right now, our primary revenue source from Phore is the block rewards that are produced by the blockchain. So I think that is a bit of a unique funding source in itself. That the more people are interested in Phore, the more people are using it, the more valuable it would become, and therefore those block rewards would become worth more as well. So the more the market cap of Phore increases, the more we have as a budget to spend on development. So I think there's a virtuous cycle there, where if we can deliver value, it becomes more valuable, and therefore we can spend more and we can continue to grow it. So I think with additional success in the future, that essentially could be a self-sustaining model by itself. I think the monetization strategies over time could take a number of forms with the marketplace, though. One idea I've thought about is, let's say you did have a transaction fee, but it was 1% or 0.5% or something smaller, because we certainly wouldn't want to make it like a 10% sort of thing. But that 1% might actually be in the form of Phore that is burned. And so then that would essentially benefit everybody that owns Phore, right? And it would offset maybe some of the inflation that's inherent in some of these protocols, both proof of work and proof of stake, that have a certain amount of inflation every year because they're creating new coins. But if you're burning coins as it's being used, then the more the marketplace is used, the less, the more the supply goes down, and it may actually generate more value for everyone who holds it. So to me, that's a very innovative model too. You're not going to see that with dollars.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, but in the sense of a cryptocurrency, it actually could make some sense to do that sort of thing, where you could say we're providing a service to the community, and essentially it's paying back to the community. So we may explore some of those ideas. In other cases, maybe we would say, if you want a set of power seller tools, or if you want assistance from us, because we provide a lot of services as well. We do a lot of blockchain development, but we also will potentially be able to help people, whether it's hosting stores or doing certain things for people to make it easier for them. Then potentially those would be paid in Phore as well, or it would be another revenue source for us. So I think there's a lot of choices we have. Certainly, you could also go through an advertising type of channel and say, if we have a search engine, you could get premier placement on the search engine by paying an extra fee. I've thought about potentially even branching that out into other types of advertising networks, because we certainly want to appeal to the broader audience of everyone, not just the crypto audience. So you might be able to go, I don't know if it would be AdWords, but it might be some other mechanism where you'd say, if you want to pay a certain fee, we'll take your listing and put it in an ad that gets sent to a whole bunch of other websites and brings people into your store. And so I think that could potentially be an embedded service that people would say, yeah, I want to do that. And if I can do it all in one place, I could just click a button and pay a little fee, and it gets more business coming my way. I can maybe see all the metrics as it happens too. So you can measure it very easily, but in the same sense, it's still private, where you don't have someone else tracking things on your behalf necessarily. So I think there's a lot of directions we could go, and we're still exploring exactly what we're going to start with there. I do want it to be a sustainable product on its own, kind of independent from the Phore cryptocurrency, but I also think they are linked and could have some synergies there where success in one could help drive success in the other.
Yeah, cool. And there's a lot there. There's a lot of ways it could go. I mean, Shash from Altcoin Buzz, one of the co-founders of Altcoin Buzz, was on our first episode, and he talked a lot about how the whole market is experimenting, and it's because it's completely new. It's new innovation. There's a lot of new things going on, so the whole market is experimenting with what to do, and he loved that. And I think that's something that everyone is sort of watching projects like yours and other innovative projects out there, and seeing them and seeing, oh, they experimented with that. That's cool. That works, and learning from each other, which is a great thing to do.
I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, we, as a project, we also want to embrace the ecosystem and collaborating with other projects too. So we're looking at partnerships all the time. We actually have a partnership with Redcoin, so we'll be adding Redcoin as another cryptocurrency in the Phore marketplace. We'll probably be doing the same thing with other cryptocurrencies in the future. And so where there is mutual benefit, I think we'll continue to do that and provide essentially a use case to many other cryptocurrencies that might not have as clear of a general use case right now, by saying you can buy and sell things for your cryptocurrency on the Phore marketplace. Maybe there is a small fee of some kind paid in Phore or something else that makes sure that there is a benefit to Phore. But even just the exposure of the marketplace might be enough to say that's worth it to Phore to bring in a big audience. And so I think over time, I'm hoping that we can be a kind of a bridge between a bunch of cryptocurrencies, and part of that solution that I described earlier of being kind of across a bunch of things as opposed to being more of an island, which is how unfortunately, I think a lot of cryptocurrency projects think right now. They want everyone to just use their cryptocurrency and no one else, where I'm a lot more open in terms of my attitude of saying, I don't expect to be the only cryptocurrency. I want to optimize for what I think we can be the best at. But I also think there's plenty of other projects that can be the best at what they're trying to do. And I'd like to support them and have some way that we could help each other. If they have a solution that's better than mine in a certain thing, maybe I can use them for that, and they can use Phore for something else. And so I'd certainly like to be able to expand outward in that sense as well.
Yeah, definitely. That's cool. And it smacks a lot of the sharing economy and the new way of doing business, which is brilliant. So just segueing onto the market a little bit. So what's it been like running a crypto project through the last year and a half, sort of, the massive 2017 upturn and then down and through the bear market?
Yeah, well, I think it's been a challenge. I think a lot of the team has been with Phore through a lot of that time, and I think they've been fortunate that most of the people have stuck with the project. In fact, we've grown the team through that period, so we've added developers even in the middle and end of last year. So I think we've had a fair amount of success in terms of weathering the storm and having support from the community to continue funding the project and all of those things. Certainly, we've seen a lot of other projects that are either losing developers or needing help, but in some cases, we've even been able to step in and help with some of those other projects as well. So I think we've been able to find ways to essentially, be sustainable through that time, but also find ways that we can mutually benefit again by saying, like, for example, I'm an advisor on Monetary Unit, and So I help maintain their wallet. We actually, as a project, moved them from a proof of work coin to a proof of stake coin, a lot similar to what Phore is using, because they were having one of those 51% attacks. And so at this point, we're kind of helping with maintaining their wallet and get a little bit of revenue from that. And so it helps us and it helps them because they don't have a huge development team on their side, but they don't necessarily want one. So I think there are some creative ways that we found to kind of weather the storm as the prices have been going down. But I think our main focus has really been just on making Phore as valuable as we can. I mean, we're pretty passionate about what we're doing, and Julian Meyer, our lead developer, is very passionate about it. He's actually a college student right now, but he's brilliant and has done a lot of great work and has stuck with us through a lot of this. And I give a lot of credit to him on a lot of the work, especially related to Synapse. And again, I think it certainly is you have to ride the ups and ride the downs as far as that goes. And in some cases, you might say we've got to not have as much income when the prices are bad, but hopefully it'll come back around later. But again, I think there are a lot of strategies that we can use to get through the bad times and make the technology better and make it more useful to people. And to me, that's really my philosophy. I don't try and watch the price every day. Yeah. I'm not looking to say, oh, I'm hoping it's going to be something or targeting a certain amount by a certain time. It's more just I want to make Phore as valuable as it can be. And then the market is going to have to decide what that's worth. And that's really the attitude that the team takes. We don't try to predict or promote any sort of price movements in the price of Phore. It's just, we want to make this as useful as we can, and we want to have as many users as we can. And I think if we do that, then the price will probably follow at some point.
Yeah, cool. That's really, really interesting. I like that. It's a good opportunity to segue into a little bit away from Phore into the whole market as a whole. And let's talk about how you originally got into crypto, because everyone's got their crypto story. How did they get into crypto?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, in my personal case, I think my first purchase of Bitcoin, it was $400. So yeah. It was a long time ago. It was just something that was selling on a website for Bitcoin, and they gave some kind of discount if you used Bitcoin. So I decided to do it that way. Didn't pay much attention to it after that. I think I had some Bitcoin left over, and it was interesting to me though, because I would come back to it maybe a year later, and then it was worth more than what I purchased, even though I had spent most of it. It kept gaining in value. So that certainly got my attention to some extent. But I actually think it was some relatives of mine, my sister and some other family that were pretty deeply involved with some different cryptocurrencies, that I started having conversations with them and got kind of more interested in it, got into some Discord chats and things, and started really paying more attention to the industry. So to me, that's really what got it started. I ran across Phore, and it was pretty early when it was first launching, and so I thought it might be a good thing to get involved in early. I liked the passive income aspect of Masternodes, so that was one of the things that was intriguing me at the time. But then as I got more involved in the community, it was just a great bunch of people, and I wanted to see if I could help. And I thought my skill set could really help advance it. I've been doing technology consulting for over 25 years. Last decade or so, I've worked for Deloitte Consulting. I've worked, for everything from Fortune 10 clients down to, smaller entrepreneurial endeavors. But I also left consulting for a while and did a startup. I led the development team for Tektura, which is a software as a service startup that would serve the construction industry. And we developed an application that processed construction payments for large projects. So for a couple of years, I was developing that flagship product to do that sort of thing. And then if I were developing today, I probably would be trying to use blockchain because it was a good sort of application for that. It has a lot of things where you are holding payments and escrow for documents and things like that. So it made a lot of sense, but blockchain didn't exist back then. This was in 2004. So, but I developed that system. That company went on to do a successful IPO and then eventually got acquired by Oracle. So Oracle bought them for $667 million. So, I think, and that system is still operating today. I think they're processing something like 3.5 billion in payments every month. So I think I have some pretty good skills and credibility about being able to deliver a large-scale commercial system like that and making it secure and understanding what's involved and what it takes to deliver a system like that. So, that was partly how I decided, okay, I think I can help these people. I think I can help Phore do what they're trying to do. And so I got more and more involved, and it really just became passionate about it. I thought this really is exciting to me, and I want to continue doing it. So I've now left Deloitte, and I'm doing this full time, and I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, so if anyone doubts the credibility of the Phore team, I mean, they just need to listen to the last 2 minutes, and they'll instantly regret doubting them at all. So that's really interesting. So, you got involved in Phore, and that proves that obviously Phore has a lot to offer the world. But what are some of your, you might not be at liberty to say, but whether you are or not, I don't know. But what are some of your favorite coins that aren't Phore, of course?
I try not to really get into that. I would say that personally, my own investment actually is mostly in Phore, just because that's what I believe in, and I want it to be also kind of one of those burn the ships things where it's like, that's my success. If I make this work, it'll work for me too. But I certainly am, as I said, a fan of other cryptocurrencies. I think there are a lot of very good, legitimate projects for different types of use cases. There are none that I would say, at least of the bigger ones, where I'd say, oh yeah, that's a terrible one. I mean, we actually have pretty much of a policy of not criticizing or bad mouthing any other projects. Even ones that we might see as direct competitors. It's like, you have your space that you're going after, your community you're going after, and we'd actually like to be friendly with you and maybe even collaborate with you at some point, in the future. And so it's been interesting sometimes, because we'll have sometimes someone from one of these communities show up and discover Phore, and then say, wait a second, you're doing something similar to what we're doing. And then they'll almost be like upset about it, or wanting to say, well, why are we better than Phore, or why is Phore maybe better than us? And I usually try and just like say, look, we both have our own projects, and I'm sure we're both doing good work, and there's really no reason why we need to be trying to put down the other side. I mean, I actually applaud the competition, and I like it because I think it drives us all to be better. And I think people have good ideas, and if they have a better idea, then maybe we will even model something after that, or they can model something after us. And I think that's great. I don't take the attitude that if someone forks Phore, which probably almost 10 coins have now, I say that's great. I find it flattering that they think our technology is the best base for them to start on. And so, I'm very open to the open source movement and the open source community. I think it helps all of us to be able to say, let's let the best ideas win, and also let them spread. I want every coin to be more secure. I don't want to have people getting attacked or hacked or any of these things. And so where we can help, we do. I mean, I would even point to a recent example where there was a vulnerability in proof of stake, and it actually affected almost all proof of stake coins similar to Phore. And it was disclosed to us, and they told us they were going to go public a few months later with it, and we came up with a solution. Julian primarily did that, but I helped with some of the aspects of it too. And so we actually were the only project that solved it before the public disclosure. For the particular vulnerability that affected us. And I think there was 2 parts of it, and a few projects had solved the other one, but the one that affected us, we were the only ones that fixed it. And we checked a few weeks later, and there was over 50 projects that had taken our code and used it to fix it. But I thought that was great. I'm glad that we could help with all those things, and I'm glad that our code is out there. And I think that's how this system should work. I think we should all try and help each other.
Yeah, cool. Definitely smacks of the sharing economy once again, and that's really interesting. So, so what's your current? I've asked everyone who's been on this so far, what's your current opinion of the market and where the market's at currently?
I still try to shy away from that. I mean, it's hard for me to say this is what I predict to happen. I mean, I guess if I were just going to give an opinion, I would say that it seems to me like we've either reached the bottom or we're reaching a bottom, but I certainly would not be able to put any sort of certainty level on that. I mean, if Bitcoin went down to 2,000 in a week, I guess at this point that wouldn't surprise me. But I would say, to me, just following the market action, it seems to me like it's probably starting to look a little more positive. But I still, in my mentality, don't pay as much attention to just daily ups and downs in the market. It's more what's happening in the industry. And to me, that's all positive. I mean, I see so many things happening, whether it's regulatory things or whether it's just technology developments, or whether it's industry adoption sorts of things. Yes, we've had a lot of people kind of exit during the bear market, but I actually think that is somewhat healthy, that the people who might not have been fully committed to it or might just have been in it just for the money are kind of leaving, and I think that is a healthy thing. But I think the people that are sticking with it are really committed to it, and they're driving things forward, and I just see more and more things happening all the time. I think institutions are starting to get more interested in it. Major companies are saying, okay, this isn't just a fad. It's not going away. We may need to look at adopting it and embracing it. And I think that's a great thing. And so I see a lot of positive developments in the market from that perspective. So that's part of my own optimism, is that I really don't see things moving in a negative direction really anywhere as far as that goes. I see more and more jurisdictions, like in the United States. It almost seems like every state is trying to fight now over having the best cryptocurrency regulations to attract businesses to the state. Yeah. And I see that sort of thing happening all over the place. So I'm pretty optimistic as far as where we're going to go in the future.
Yeah, definitely. That's really cool. I mean, from my perspective as well, philosophically, I feel like a lot of value has been added to the market that's not actually translated into proper value in monetary value. Lots of things have been integrated into big coins, a lot of new projects, a lot of new, mainnets and that sort of thing being released and been sort of no reaction, which I feel like as the market starts to mature, that sort of value added becomes really powerful and will become powerful as we move forward.
I mean, I think it'll come. I think at some point you will see a big spike up like we saw before. I can't, of course, predict how big or how long or any of that, but I do think it'll come, and I think you'll see a renewed interest in it. I think right now it is because we've had such a prolonged bear market that the average investor just isn't paying as much attention to that. But I think when it starts turning around, I think that could change pretty quickly. And as I said, I think as the industry matures in terms of the solutions, it will also just drive actual adoption, which is really what I care about more. It's not as much about a speculative investment. It's about actual usage that I'd like to see more of. And so a lot of what we're doing is saying we need to make this more user-friendly. There's still a lot of barriers. If someone wants to buy a cryptocurrency, it could potentially take them a week or, a lot of different steps to get to where they want to go with it. And I think that needs to change. And I think there's lots of ways that could happen. I think it's going to take some time, but I do think there's a ways to go to say, you can just easily buy it without having either a huge fee to pay or a big process to go through. And then the same thing for using it. And we're certainly trying to do our part in that to knock down those barriers. But I'm hoping that a lot of other aspects of the industry will also make it easier to, purchase, sell, know what you owe in tax, and, understand how to use it at a store and just have it more accessible on all aspects of it in terms of saying I can actually pay for things with cryptocurrency now and not worry so much about, it being kind of a niche thing that you can only use in one or two different places. So I think we have a ways to go, but I also think there's just a tremendous opportunity there. And I see it starting to happen, so I'm encouraged by that.
Yeah, definitely. And both Shash and Box Mining, when I interviewed them, they both spoke about how user base was really where the value comes from. I mean, you can have, even conventionally, if we just ignore the crypto space in general by itself, if we just look at business in general, you had Twitter worth, I think 30 billion before it had made a dollar in profit. So you've got massive user bases are where the value comes. And I think that's what, a lot of crypto has to focus on, is getting that user base and getting it to be user friendly like you guys are doing, and to make it easily accessible to people who aren't that technologically minded or technologically gifted. And I think that's definitely where the market has to head to allow more people into the market.
It's definitely a big focus for us. I mean, I think it's really important to provide solutions that don't require a lot of technical knowledge or a lot of steps that someone has to follow to make it so complicated that they just won't do it. And so I think that's our responsibility. It's not people need to be educated on how to use crypto. I think crypto needs to be easier to use. And so we're trying to do everything we can to make our wallet easier to use, to make our marketplace easier to use, to build bridges to allow things to be exchanged easily, and just knock down a lot of those barriers so that someone can just say, I can put up a store and sell something tomorrow, and I don't have to take any steps in between. But even the marketplace is one bridge that does that. I mean, you can sell something right now and get Phore, and that's all you have to do. You have Phore. That's step one. That's the last step. You don't have to go through any exchanges. You don't have to do any KYC. You don't have to do anything. You can just sell a product or a service, and now you have Phore. And if you want to trade it, you can trade it, but you can keep it. You can use it for staking or Masternodes, and so to me, that's another on-ramp that we're providing to say, if you want to get involved in it, that's all you really need to do.
Yeah, definitely. That's really cool, because getting access to coins is a big thing. Is a big thing for people across the world. Is getting access to them instead of having to go, I'll buy Bitcoin on Coinbase, I'll transfer that to that exchange, I'll buy the coin there, transfer that to my wallet. It's a lot of steps, especially for people who don't know that much about technology or crypto in general. So that functionality and being able to just, and I'm going to sell something and I'll get Phore is really great. So in terms of the market as well, in 2017 we saw a lot of ICOs. We saw a lot of ICOs across the world in all sorts of things, and there's been some that have delivered and some that haven't. So what's your sort of opinion on ICOs in general? People have been calling them dead recently. Are they dead, or are they still alive, or are they still a thing that people want to do?
Well, I think certainly as an overall market, it seems to have dried up a lot, especially in terms of the larger ICOs. I think I expressed earlier that I actually like our model better than an ICO model in terms of the community involvement, the accountability, but also the fact that it's more sustainable. The revenue comes regularly over time, as opposed to saying I get one shot, and then where does the revenue come from after that? I mean, regardless of how much you raised, it's going to run out, right? So certainly you can make an argument if you raise billions of dollars, you've got a big war chest. But unfortunately, I think a lot of ICOs weren't very responsible with it either, and they ended up losing a lot of the value as the market value went down too. And so I do think that some projects have struggled because of that. But I think certainly fundraising, I don't think is dead. I think there actually is a lot of investment happening in the blockchain space. It probably just isn't quite as public. I think a lot of it is more on the institutional side now. You have organizations like Binance Labs or IBM or other institutions that are building blockchain-related businesses and investing in them. And even governments, I think, in some cases are giving grants and things along those lines to encourage development. So I think a lot of investment is happening, but I think the ICO, in terms of going forward to people to buy coins, certainly has taken a dip. I certainly think it could come back, but I'm hoping actually that there is a bit more regulation around it in terms of making sure it is a legitimate thing. You've certainly seen some cases where people raised money and then never delivered anything for it and might not have even used their real identities. And I think there was a lack of protections against things happening that, unfortunately, to your earlier point, governments are kind of late stepping in to figure out how do we make this work. And I think they are trying to do that now in terms of saying, here are what the rules are, here's what you need to follow, here's when you are a security. And I certainly applaud those measures, and I think it may create more space for that to happen in the future in a more legitimate way, based on people understanding, okay, here are the rules I have to follow. I need to do all these regulatory filings, whatever jurisdiction I'm in, but at least I know what I need to do. Because I think that was part of the problem. When you did these ICOs, nobody knew what the rules were. You didn't know if you were supposed to file something with the SEC, and it was maybe a year later you found out you didn't do something you were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one reason why I'm happy we didn't go down that road, because we may not have done all the right things if we weren't sure what to do. But at the same time, I do think it's certainly a legitimate way to raise funds. I think, or it can be. But I think the framework needs to be in place for people to understand what they're investing in, to understand what's being promised, and to understand the people that are involved and make sure that they're not deceiving anyone. So I'm certainly hopeful that in the future, when you see any sort of return of ICOs, that they would be with a lot more due diligence, both on the part of investors as well as other analysts or industry people and governments that might be providing some level of oversight. Because, as much as I am a decentralization fanatic, I still think that in some cases you do need to provide some oversight, and that, again, there's a lot of people that might just not be a sophisticated investor and might be pretty easy to take advantage of. And that's what I hate to see, is when someone is ripped off, not understanding what they're doing or not understanding what they're investing in. So, there is a balance there. I don't know exactly what the right thing is, but I think it's better to have some guidance in terms of that. And so, again, that's what I'm hoping to see in the future.
Yeah. So my particular problem with that, with ICOs, from new investors, young investors, there's a misunderstanding that if you invest in an ICO, it's completely separate from the equity in the company, or the open protocol, whatever it was. And it's basically a way of raising funds without having to give away any part of the company. And in that sense, a lot of investors, all you got was a bit of a coin that might not even have a utility in the long run. So that was my particular problem with ICOs, the fact that, you can rate the companies raising, hundreds of millions, and they didn't have to do anything with their equity. They're still 100% owners, or they're still majority owners. They got some VCs involved as well. But yeah, that was my particular problem with ICOs. But you touched a bit on regulation there as well, and you've talked about regulation quite a few times tonight. So what's your particular opinion on the regulation of the crypto space?
Well, again, I think it's important to have an understanding of what rules you're supposed to follow. So I do want some sort of framework in place to say, here's what is legitimate, not legitimate, here's what you can and can't do. I certainly would like it to be as light of a touch as we can with that, because I do hope that governments will take the attitude of saying we want to embrace this and encourage this technology, as opposed to saying we want to shut it down and keep people from doing it. But I think to me, it really is no different than other aspects of at least maybe the financial arena, to say whether you're making a derivative or an option or any other kind of financial product, that there are certain rules you need to follow. And when you make statements to people that are investing in you, that you can't lie, and you are at least in some aspects held accountable for what you're promising. But I think it is an interesting model in what you said, which is they're not actually accountable for anything. It's not like they're saying, if I don't deliver, I don't get the money, because the money's given up front. So I do think it's it is something that people might have misunderstood in some cases. But I think what I'd like to see is maybe a bit more of a blend of the two, where I know there is a big movement in terms of having securitized tokens and securities that you actually are buying equity, as opposed to just buying a token that may not actually be used for anything in the future. And so I think in some senses, maybe that's part of the solution, is to say, if you're investing in a company, you actually are investing in the company, and you own part of that company, or you own part of whatever asset is backing that token. And there's a lot of different models being experimented with those things as well. I think that's going to be one of the future trends, in terms of saying it isn't just a utility token or a currency that you're investing in, that it's actually a real part of a company. But even if that's the case, you still need to understand, what is this company that I'm investing in, and what am I actually getting for that slice of ownership that I have. In many cases, even if you buy stocks, you don't have voting rights, you don't have much say in what happens, but you do at least say, okay, if they do pay a dividend, then hopefully I would be getting part of that. And there is an underlying value there that you can try and calculate, whether it's based on book value or revenues or profits, that might help understand the value of what you're investing into. So I do think a lot more of the investing is moving more towards that equity end of things, whether it is private, like I described earlier, or whether it's potentially in the future through the securitized tokens. But I'm sure there will be some ICOs in the future. I think right now it's just going to be tough to get hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't think that's going to happen in the near future.
Yeah, and I feel like it's everything is just getting a little bit more sophisticated in the whole space, including this area. Moving from ICOs to STOs, where you actually are being backed up by something when you invest. What's your opinion then? So you talked a bit about the need for regulation in the space, the need for regulation with investing, regulation of coins, etc. So what's your opinion then on bank coins? JPM coin, JP Morgan's come out with a coin. What's your opinion on banks getting into the space?
Well, I think first, that's like one niche of the market. You might look at something like XRP as a competitor to what they're doing. So I suppose you might want to look at it in light of how XRP might compare to something like a JPM coin or the previous Citi coin that apparently never went forward. But I guess the skepticism I would have about something like a JPM coin is just that they are a centralized entity, right? Like they're a major corporation. They're mostly, providing a set of financial services and products to clients already. I guess I haven't certainly researched in depth, and I certainly think they're free to pursue it. I think it's great for them to experiment as well. I like to see institutions saying, "Hey, we're going to get involved in this space too." But I certainly think it's an interesting thing with JP Morgan, just because they've had some of their leaders say, "We don't think this is legitimate in terms of crypto in general," and then they turn around and make their own coin. So it's positive in some way that it does seem like a signal that they're embracing the market and they're embracing the fact that maybe they even want to play a part in it. But I certainly think that a lot of the people, at least currently, who are attracted to cryptocurrencies are the people who like decentralization, and they like not having any institution that controls the currency itself. And so that's, to me, where it might be a little bit harder to make the argument for something like a Citi coin or a JPM coin, because it's like, well, clearly they're probably going to be in control of it. And I suppose I'd have to look at their white paper and look at what they're doing to see if it actually is more decentralized. I haven't researched it in depth, so I can't really comment on that. But to me, it would need to be looked at that way. And that depends on your view. I mean, if you think that JP Morgan is a great institution, and certainly they are in terms of the products and services they sell to a lot of their happy customers, then maybe it is a good solution for a particular niche in the market. But I do think that it would probably raise a lot of skepticism in terms of a lot of people who think, when I think cryptocurrency, I think decentralized, and that's certainly what we're going after at Phore, is to say it's not backed by a government, it's not backed by an institution. It's a decentralized, community-driven thing that community is governing in a decentralized way, where if you have a corporation that's leading the development and leading everything behind it, it just doesn't seem to quite fit the same model. So I guess we'll have to see how it develops.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there. It doesn't harm anyone them making a coin. It doesn't harm, it doesn't harm people out in the crypto space. But I just don't really see how they can really justify it as a cryptocurrency if it's going to be completely centralized. And I mean, I kind of agree with Box Mining's point when I talk to him that the JPM coin basically just validates the whole space. Validates the space in terms of institutional eyes, by them making a cryptocurrency. So they've kind of been, they've been very hypocritical in terms of completely slating cryptocurrencies and decentralization, and then, oh wait, we've actually got a cryptocurrency, guys. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting marketing play by them, but. Yeah, so that's really interesting points of view, and I think we're coming towards a little bit towards the end now, and we'll segue back into Phore, into talking about Phore. So you've got a very committed, obviously a very committed development team. There's a lot of things on your roadmap. So what do you think is next for Phore?
Well, we still have these different areas of the business that we're all moving forward at the same time. So the Phore Marketplace, we're going to be coming out with a release probably within the next week or two. We're just finishing up the final testing of that. So that will include having decentralized crypto trading. It'll include some of the verified moderator features that I described earlier. And it has several user interface improvements as well. So we're hoping that it's a better user experience overall. From there, I think we're going to try and push through the rest of beta testing and go to a full launch of the marketplace. So you'll see a lot more promotion of that, both on the merchant side as well as trying to attract more buyers. But as we exit beta, we're also going to be looking at adding more currencies. So Redcoin is probably going to be the first one we'll add, but we may follow with some additional currencies as well to try and drive more traction and usage of the marketplace and some of those partnerships that I mentioned. On the blockchain side, we're driving full force to get Synapse, that new architecture, developed as quickly as we can. I don't want to give a time frame on that because we do have a significant amount of work left, and I just don't have a really good feel for exactly how long it's going to take. But we are making good progress every day. You can watch the progress online. It's all open source, so you can see the commits that are being done on a regular basis. Yeah. But we have the main beacon chain mostly working at this point in terms of a test net, and then we're going to start working on those shards that we described after that. And so as soon as we reach a point where all the critical functionality that we have today is available in the new architecture, then we'll move over and start moving forward from there. But in the meantime, we are still making user interface improvements and other things to our current core wallet as well. So right now I'm finishing up a release that includes a graphical user interface for creating those budget proposals that's part of that governance process. So that'll be coming out in the near future as well. So a lot going on all the time. We do have a lot of releases happening on a regular basis, and I think you'll continue to see that in the future. Certainly, as you mentioned, crowdfunding is going to come soon after that as quickly as we can layer that on top. But I think our first priority in terms of the marketplace is getting through beta testing and getting some of these additional currencies in place to drive more usage and traction and get more feedback from users. And then I think we'll be in a better position to start adding additional applications like crowdfunding.
Yeah, definitely. That's really cool. I mean, you touched on quite a lot there. So what do you think, are the specific most exciting, developments coming to Phore and opportunities with Phore in the next year?
Well, I'd say I'm probably most excited about some of the things that are come with Synapse. I mean, I think having both the sharding, but especially smart contracts is really exciting for a lot of people. Yeah. When we've polled the community, usually smart contracts is the thing that people say they're waiting for the most. So I'm really looking forward to having that capability. And, we might see some tokens being issued even on the Phore platform. We certainly have had some conversations with people about doing that. And so it opens up just so many additional possibilities for us. And I think as I mentioned earlier, it also has a lot of potential synergies with the marketplace and the other decentralized applications. So I'm really looking forward to having that base architecture in place. And it'll make us more secure, more scalable, and just have a ton more capabilities. So to me, the exciting part is just, I hope that we can get even more external developers involved and people building integrations into other services. That would be really exciting for me. So if there's anybody listening to this and you want to get involved, or if you have an itch you want to scratch as a developer and you think you might want to help with Phore, we're very open to external assistance. Yeah. And we'd love to see whether you want to develop your own application or some sort of service built on top of Phore. We'd be happy to help with that. So, I'm excited about the future, and I'm hoping to see things continue to grow.
Yeah. So just on that, if anyone's out there, where should they go to contact you guys, or where should they go to learn more about Phore in general?
Sure. Well, we have a website at phore.io. It's Phore, if that's not already up on the screen. And all the links for our social media, including Discord and Telegram, are there. I would say Discord is probably where the team hangs out the most. So if you're looking for one of us, you can find us on Discord. But we're certainly also available on Telegram. We have a lot of followers on Twitter and our Phore blockchain Twitter account. So you can find us in all those different places. And again, all the links for that are on our website at phore.io.
Yeah. And we'll put a link down below to a few of those social media, and we'll put a link to your website as well. So anyone who wants to go there, just click a link down in the description below. Well, I think that's about it. That's brilliant. We had a big discussion about everything from Phore, everything in Phore, through to the market. Everything in the market now, where the market's going, where it's been. And a few debates of which area of the market is the best, which area is worst, where we can see improvement in the future. So that's really, really, really great, and I've really enjoyed having you on. Thank you very much for being here with me.
Sure, thank you. I've enjoyed it too.
Yeah, and thank you for watching, guys. Thank you for listening. If you're on Apple Podcasts or any other podcasting site, make sure you like, subscribe, download this episode, and make sure you share it to all your friends. Thank you very much. Zach, over and out.